So if you will turn to page 291, we had about 10 minutes to work in ALEKS. We should have gotten at least one topic learned. We've had about 20 minutes. Quickly. We've had about 20 minutes to work on continuing in that boom deck. So hopefully we made some progress, if not completed it there. Make sure you're marking it as done in Google Classroom when you do finish, and that you have at least 75% correct. Otherwise, redo it. You need that practice. And I would suggest if you didn't write it down the first time you were doing it, that you write those problems down and actually work through the work. All right, so two-step equations. We're continuing on. We're solving these the same way. We just have to deal with some rational numbers here. So example 3 looks just like our first two examples, except we have a decimal, right? So our first step, remember, is still to add or subtract. This gets rid of our constant. Our second step is to multiply or divide. This gets rid of our coefficient. Sometimes our coefficients are fractions, right? If it's something, if we have a letter divided by a number. All right, so we're going to show all the work. They are getting rid of this constant by adding 3 8/10 to both sides. Negative 6.4 plus 3.8 is negative 2.6. Now, to get x by itself, they're dividing both sides by 5. And that's what they do. And today, you can totally use your calculator. So if you need a calculator, I think they're in that American basket there. If you want to take a minute to grab that. So they're saying negative 2.6. Quickly. So remember, you have that negative button between the parentheses. And then 2.6 divided by 5. And if we cheat down here, we see what we should get. So we're checking to be sure we're using our calculator properly. And it is negative 52 hundredths. So negative 0.52 or negative 0.52, however you want to write it. It looks like this or this. Check your solution. So they're putting in now what we found x to be, for x to be sure that we end up with this. So I would go one step further to combine those. That would make negative 6 4/10. So negative 6 4/10 does equal negative 6 4/10. So the solution would be correct. Any questions about 291? Hopefully you were doing that with regular numbers. Obviously, we have to think through a little bit when we have decimals. So go ahead and check your work here. So remember, we're going to add or subtract. Are we going to add 8.1 or subtract 8.1 from both sides? If I subtract it, I'm not going to get rid of it. I need the opposite of it. What's the opposite of negative 8.1? Positive. So I'm going to add it to both sides. You can put this directly into your calculator. So clear it and put in negative 5.7. Negative 5.7 plus 8.1. So 2 4/10 here, and it is positive. You can trust your calculator as long as you're putting in the correct signs for your numbers. And then that is equal to negative 6x. If our first step is to add or subtract, our second step is to multiply or divide, what am I going to do next here? Gotta divide both sides by what? Remember, I'm showing division with a fraction bar. I'm going to divide them both by -6. Should not be 8.1. I've already added 8.1 to both sides. So this became 0. This went hasta bye-bye. And we're left with just this -6. I brought it down. I did this math to get 2.4. Now I'm dividing both sides by -6. So x should equal... I have a 2.4 there already, so I'm just going to say divided by -6. I'm expecting a negative answer. So -4/10 would be my x. If I was checking my work, remember I would say -6 times -4/10 minus 8.1, and I should get -5.7. So this should be 2.4 minus 8.1. Does that equal -5.7? Yes, it does. If you put this in your calculator, you will get -5.7. So we're just taking what x equals, substituting to be sure to check our answer, okay? All right. Here, I know your fractions, you're not a huge fan, but this is simply like r over 5 here. We're gonna multiply, instead of dividing by 1/5, we multiply by its reciprocal, right? So again, we're adding or subtracting. In this case, we have to get rid of a +4, so we're subtracting 4 from both sides. And if you think about dividing this by 1/5, remember, if we had 1/5 divided by 1/5, we would keep the first, change to multiplication, flip the second. So that is why we're multiplying by the reciprocal, because the reciprocal gives us 1. But whatever I do to the left side, I have to do to the right side. So that's why they multiplied the -5 by 5 as well to get our answer. And you guys did this a lot in your Boom deck, except that you saw this equation as 4 plus r over 5 is equal to -1. It's the only difference that you saw. So you subtracted 4, then multiplied by 5. Same thing. Okay. This is a little bit different though. We have to multiply by the reciprocal. So when we have a fraction, when we divide by a fraction, it's the same as multiplying by its reciprocal. Reciprocal is a term you should know. Remember, it means that the fraction is flipped. Flip the fraction. So are we adding or subtracting first? Subtracting. If I subtract 2, don't do it. But if I subtract 2, I've got -4 plus 2/3 W equals 8. Am I any closer to getting that W? Yes. We would plus 2 to begin with, but at that point you could plus 4. So if I add 2 to both sides, this becomes 0. That's its additive inverse, making it 0. I'm bringing down my 2/3 W. And it equals 12. Now, if I'm thinking about dividing by a fraction, I have to multiply by its reciprocal. So I'm going to multiply both sides by the reciprocal of 2/3. What's 2/3 flipped? The bottom goes to the top goes to the bottom. So whatever I multiply this left side by, I have to multiply this right side by. Remember, excuse me, these cross cancel, we're left with one W. But what I was getting at is, remember when we have something underneath our fraction bar, we're dividing by that. We're multiplying by what's on top and dividing by what's on bottom. So if we divide by 2 first, we have what? What's 12 divided by 2? 6. And then we're multiplying by what's on top. So 6 times 3 is 18. If you need to look at it like this, you can, right? Write that whole number as a fraction. So I would cancel across here. 2 goes into 2 once, into 12. Or you could have said 36 divided by 2, which would have also given you 18. So this is 18 over 1, which we wrote as 18. Okay? So arithmetic method, algebraic method, we are going to look at our practice problems now. You've had a lot of practice, especially with these with whole numbers. So we've got 1 through 12 today. In 10 minutes, I would expect you to get at least half of them done, I would say. You guys should be getting pretty quick at this. But now that you have paper in front of you, I know you guys didn't like to with your boom decks, but when you have paper in front of you and on the quiz, I am expecting you to show your work. Remember, your first step is to add or subtract. Your second is to multiply or divide. Okay? So are you going to add or subtract first? Really? If I add 2, am I going to get rid of my 2? No, I'm going to subtract 2 from both sides. Do that. Try these out. All right. So tomorrow we'll come back and practice more and add a little bit of the apply. And then we'll start writing our own 2-step and so on.